The police dog. Everyone forgot, but he never forgot his mission. Nathan never planned to stop in that town. It was a rest break, coffee, gas, maybe a sandwich. But fate has a way of rerouting soldiers, especially when ghosts are waiting. At a local flea market, something tugged at him. Not the smell of grilled sausages, not the stale knickknacks. It was a sound, a soft, ragged exhale. He turned, and there he was, a German shepherd, thin, silent, eyes that didn't blink, a body that once leapt through fire now barely stood. Nathan knelt. His fingers brushed the dog's neck, and under a dirty collar, something clinked, a rusted metal tag. Argus Tactical Services. Nathan's blood ran cold. He hadn't heard that name since the day they lied and took Aries away. That's when everything changed. This wasn't just a chance encounter. It was a reckoning. What Nathan discovered next would uncover a buried paper trail, ignite a national outcry, and give a voice to the voiceless four-legged heroes discarded by the very hands they once saved. You think you know what loyalty looks like? Watch, and let Aries show you. The city square pulsed with late afternoon life. Street performers strummed guitars beneath statues. Food vendors called out daily specials through plumes of smoke and spices, and children weaved through the maze of legs and laughter, their joy spilling out like sunshine. Nathan Cole stood at the edge of the movement, still as stone. His boots rested on the faded bricks of the square, but his mind was somewhere else entirely. Maybe it was the way the light hit the edge of the bench across the plaza. Maybe it was instinct, or memory, or fate. But something stopped him mid-stride, right as he was passing the flower stall near the north fountain. He'd meant to keep walking, grab a coffee, pick up dog food for the foster mutt that never arrived. But his eyes caught something that pulled the breath straight from his lungs. There, under a chipped wooden bench mottled by age and pigeon droppings, lay a dog. Not just a dog, a German shepherd, gaunt, filthy, ribs like piano keys straining against matted fur. His paws were tucked beneath his chest, and a tattered rope leash trailed from his collar to the trembling hand of the elderly man beside him. An old veteran, judging by the boots and the faded Marine Corps cap pulled low over a wrinkled face. But Nathan didn't notice the man. His gaze was locked onto the eyes of the dog. Amber. Deep, haunting, human in their knowing. They weren't just familiar. They were impossible. Aries? Nathan whispered the name like a ghost escaping his lips. His voice was swallowed by the crowd, but the sound didn't need to carry. The dog's ears flicked. Slowly, with aching stiffness, the shepherd lifted his head. Time fractured, the world its car horns, laughter, the slap of shoes on stone, fell away like sound underwater. Nathan's hands trembled. His legs carried him forward before he even realized he was moving, step by step, across the square. The closer he got, the sharper the details became. The scar, that scar running along the left flank, jagged like a lightning bolt frozen in skin, it had been pink once. Now it was nearly white. He remembered how Aries had gotten it, remembered the blast, the blood, the way the dog had thrown himself between Nathan and the grenade's shrapnel like he'd been born to protect. No, not a memory, a promise. He stopped just feet away. The dog. Aries didn't move. He stared, but something flickered. Recognition. Hope. Nathan dropped to one knee, hands open, voice cracking as it left him again. "It's me, boy. It's me." The shepherd let out a low whimper. Not fear, not warning, just something broken being glued back together. His tail twitched, once, then twice against the pavement. Before Nathan could reach out, a shadow loomed. "Back off!" The old man stood between them now, voice rough like gravel and old wounds. His grip on the rope leash tightened, fingers white around the frayed edges. "What do you think you're doing?" Nathan stood slowly, not in challenge, but in restraint. I know that dog," he said, heart hammering. "Yeah, so do I." The man's eyes narrowed beneath the brim of his hat. "He's mine. Found him half dead behind a dumpster 6 months ago. You looking to take him? You one of those dog thieves or something?" "No," Nathan said quickly. "No, I swear, I'm not here to take him. I just—" His voice faltered. What could he say? That 6 years ago, this same shepherd pulled him out of a kill zone? That this dog used to sleep with his chin on Nathan's boots every night in Syria? That they bled together, fought together, survived what others didn't? That they'd been brothers? Nathan took a breath, hands still open. "His name is Ares," he said softly. The old man shook his head. "His name's Buddy now." Nathan's throat tightened. "Buddy? No. His name is Ares." The man looked like he wanted to say more, maybe shout, maybe walk away. But something, maybe the tremor in Nathan's voice, or the wetness he was blinking back, made him pause. "You really know him?" the man asked, quieter now. Suspicion still in his tone, but not outright aggression. "You know why he flinches in his sleep? Why he growls when a bus backfires? Why he don't let nobody touch his left side?" Nathan couldn't stop the tears now. They fell silent, unwelcome, but too raw to fight. "Yes," he whispered. "Because I was there when it happened." The man looked at him, long and hard. The dog, Ares, lifted his head again. This time he whined and slowly inched forward. Nathan knelt again, not daring to reach out. "I don't know what happened to him after the war. They said he was being rehomed. Said he'd go to a good place. I searched, I called, I filed reports. But they told me nothing." He looked up at the man, voice breaking. "I thought he was gone." For a long, quiet moment the old man said nothing, just stared down at the rope in his hand, at the dog who had, for months, been his only warmth in alleyways and shelters. A dog who wouldn't bark, wouldn't play, wouldn't look anyone in the eye until now. Finally, the man nodded slowly. "Then sit," he muttered, "and tell me who you are, and tell me why this dog cries when he dreams." Nathan didn't speak at first. He didn't have to. His eyes said more than words ever could, as if they'd already crossed a decade's worth of silence just to land on the form of the dog lying between them. "Ares," he whispered again, softer this time, like the name itself might hurt to hear. "God, it's really you." The dog shifted, muscles stiff with time and pain. A faint tremor ran through his frame as he attempted to lift his head again. One paw slid forward, then stilled. But it was enough. Enough for the light to catch the curve of his side, and for Nathan's heart to stop. There it was, the scar. Just above the rib cage on Ares's left flank, arcing backward like a lightning bolt burned into flesh. It had faded, yes, but the shape remained unmistakable. He knew it because he'd cleaned that wound himself, because he'd knelt over Ares, blood pooling in the dirt, screaming for medics while pressing a trembling hand to that very spot. Nathan didn't realize he was moving until his fingers hovered inches above the scar. Not touching, he didn't dare, just remembering, just seeing. A memory embedded in skin. The voice hit him like gravel. "Don't touch him!" Eli had risen from the bench. His frame was wiry and stiff beneath the layers of worn jackets, but his stance was solid, rooted like someone who'd lived too long in a world that always threatened to take away what little he had. Nathan pulled his hand back immediately, palms open again, but his eyes never left the dog. "I wasn't sorry," he stammered. "I wasn't going to hurt him. You just what?" Eli snapped. "Walk up out of nowhere and act like you own him?" Nathan stood slowly, voice calm but shaky. "No, I just recognized the scar." Eli's face twisted. "Scar don't mean anything. Dog could have gotten that from barbed wire or a damn fence. You think scars make you his owner?" "No," Nathan said gently, "but I know how he got that one." Silence. Long and thick. Aries shifted again. This time, he let out a low, rattling breath and rested his muzzle on his outstretched paw. He didn't look at either of them, but his ears flicked at every word. Listening, waiting. Eli crossed his arms tightly, shoulders hunched like he was bracing against a storm. "I've had him for months. Patched him up when nobody else would. He was skin and bones when I found him. Couldn't walk straight, wouldn't eat unless I sang to him." That last part caught Nathan off guard. "You sang to him?" Eli flushed, looking away. "Not important." "It is," Nathan said. "It means you cared." The older man's mouth opened then shut again. His hands trembled slightly. Not from age, from fear, from something deeper than possession. "He's the only thing I've got," Eli said finally, voice low. "People walk past me like I'm invisible. But him? He sits with me. Won't run, won't beg. He just stays." Nathan nodded slowly, absorbing it. The pain in Eli's voice was different than his. It wasn't about the battlefield. It was about being forgotten. And Aries had known that pain, too. "I'm not here to steal him from you," Nathan said. "I swear." "Then why are you here?" Nathan looked down at Aries, who still hadn't moved, still hadn't decided. "Because I thought he was dead," Nathan said softly. "They told me he'd be sent to a good place. I begged to adopt him after the mission, but they said he was too injured for active duty and that I wasn't authorized to claim him. Then he vanished from the system. No answers, no trail." His voice cracked. "I've been carrying that silence ever since." Eli's brow furrowed. "You were in the war?" Nathan nodded. "Special operations. Syria, Iraq. Aries wasn't just a dog. He was my teammate." He paused, letting the words settle. "He saved my life." Eli didn't respond right away. He looked down at Aries' buddy, as he'd called him, and watched as the dog's breathing slowed to something near peace. "He don't like loud noises," Eli muttered. "Screams in his sleep sometimes. Kicks like he's fighting shadows. I thought it was abuse. Thought somebody hit him before me." Nathan's eyes dropped to the scar again. "Not abuse. War. And that name you keep saying? Aries?" Nathan crouched once more, this time further away, just enough to keep space. "I named him that, after the Greek god of war. Figured he earned it the day he bit through a locked door to drag a wounded medic to safety." Eli blinked. "I didn't name him Buddy, because he's friendly," the old man said quietly. "I named him that because he was the first living soul in years who didn't leave me." Nathan swallowed hard. Maybe, he said gently. He's been waiting for both of us. Eli looked at him sharply. Don't get philosophical on me, kid. I'm not, Nathan said. I'm just asking for a chance to explain, to tell you everything. Then you can decide. Eli looked between Nathan and the dog lying silent at their feet, torn, guarded, but not angry anymore. Something in his stance softened. I've got time, he muttered. And then he slowly sat back down, one hand still resting protectively on the leash, but the other loosening just a little. Start talking. And don't lie to me. Nathan nodded. He didn't lie. He couldn't. Not when Ares was finally listening again. The square pulsed quietly around them now, a low ambient hum of footsteps and life. But for Nathan and Eli, the world had shrunk to the weathered bench, the length of rope, and the dog who hadn't moved. Nathan sat carefully on the edge of the stone planter nearby, elbows resting on his knees, palms open, not in surrender, but in reverence. Ares lay between them like a living memory half-ghost, half-breathing proof of something both broken and holy. Eli leaned back against the bench, hands folded, eyes narrowed beneath the shadow of his cap. "All right, soldier," he muttered. "You got 5 minutes. Tell me who you are, and why this dog cries in his sleep." Nathan didn't speak right away. He stared at the cracks between the bricks underfoot, as if the words he needed were buried down there, fragile and hard to unearth. Then, slowly, his voice emerged gravelly, tight. "There was a mission," he said. 6 years ago, border of northern Syria, abandoned village, half bombed out and bleeding into the hills. Intelligence said there were insurgents hiding in a collapsed compound, possibly armed. We were tasked with recon and extraction. High risk. He paused. His jaw clenched before he forced himself to breathe again. I was lead operator in our K9 unit. Ares was my partner. Not just in training or on paper, my partner. He slept beside me in the barracks. He knew my voice in 5 languages. He could clear a room in 30 seconds. He was the first one through the door and the last to sleep. Eli didn't speak, but his grip on the leash loosened slightly. Nathan's eyes glistened now, fixed somewhere far away. That day, we didn't know. Nobody knew. We moved in at nightfall. Ares was point. His ears never lied. I swear to God that dog could smell fear before it bloomed. But even he didn't see the trap. The silence around them seemed to lean in. We entered the courtyard. Dust, silence, just the creak of old beams and the crunch of boots. Then, boom. Nathan flinched as he said it, a reflex, one that lived in his spine. The whole left side of the building went up. Fire, smoke, splinters of concrete. I hit the ground hard. My comms went dead. Couldn't move my leg. Couldn't see. He swallowed. And then I felt teeth. Not biting, pulling. Ares had his jaws clamped on the strap of my vest, dragging me out of the blast radius. He was coughing from the smoke. Bleeding, too. I didn't know then, but he didn't stop. Nathan rubbed the corner of his eye quickly, as if embarrassed to wipe away the wetness. I remember grabbing his fur, holding on while he backed us into a collapsed cellar wall. We waited there while bullets hit the dirt around us. I could feel him shaking. He looked at Eli, but he never moved from my side. Not even when the shrapnel tore into him, not even when the medics arrived. They had to sedate him just to get me out. Ares stirred faintly at the memory, ears twitching, his breathing deeper now, more rhythmic. Nathan noticed, but didn't smile. I made them promise I'd get him back, he said. I filled out every form, called every number, begged every officer. But they said he wasn't fit for reassignment, said he'd be sent somewhere safe, somewhere with qualified handlers. He turned his palms up, empty. That was the last I heard of him. Eli exhaled slowly. For a moment his gaze dropped to the side, to the scar Nathan had described. It was clearer now in the fading light. "He was limping when I found him," Eli said, almost to himself. "Wouldn't take food unless I put it in my hand and waited. First few nights he'd bolt upright out of sleep, eyes wild, tail between his legs." Nathan closed his eyes briefly. "He wasn't running from dreams," he said. "He was remembering." Eli was quiet again. Nathan leaned forward, lowering his voice to something just above a whisper. "I know you saved him," he said. "You fed him, sheltered him, and I will never take that for granted." He paused. "But that dog pulled me through hell, not metaphorically, not symbolically, literally dragged me out of fire, bullets, and death. He's the reason I'm still breathing. He's the reason I came home." Eli studied Nathan for a long moment. "Home," he repeated. "That word doesn't mean the same thing to all of us, kid." Nathan nodded. "You're right." He reached into his jacket slowly and pulled out a folded, weathered photo. It showed a younger Nathan Gear, half dirty, face half smiling, and beside him, Ares, upright and alert, with a bright green vest strapped across his chest that read, U.S. Military K9 ARES. Nathan passed it wordlessly to Eli. The old man took it, his hands trembling. He stared at the image in silence for a long while. When he looked up, his eyes weren't angry anymore, just tired. "He doesn't wag his tail for anyone," Eli said hoarsely. "Not even me." "He did," Nathan said. "Back there, when I first called his name." They both looked down. Ares hadn't moved far, but his eyes were open now, and though his body was still thin and battered, something about the way he looked at Nathan had changed. There was memory there, recognition, trust, not yet whole but awakening. Eli leaned back on the bench and let out a long breath through his nose. He rubbed a hand over his face. "You want him back," he said. "I want him safe," Nathan replied. "I want him home, with someone who knows why he cries." Eli's voice cracked just a little. "I didn't know. I just thought he'd been hurt. Didn't know he carried that kind of pain." Nathan stood slowly. "It's not your fault. It's the system, the ones who use them and forget them." Eli looked at the photo again, then down at the dog at his feet. "I don't know what to do," he muttered. Nathan stepped forward, slow, deliberate. "Let me take care of him. Let me give him back what he gave me. You kept him alive. I can help him live again." For a moment, neither man spoke. Then, at last, Eli's shoulders slumped, like he'd been carrying the weight of another man's war and didn't even know it. He looked down at Ares, then up at Nathan, and with a sigh that sounded like surrender and grace rolled into one, he said, "All right, but promise me something. Anything. Give him a life that doesn't ask him to be a hero." Nathan nodded. "I promise." Syria. 6 years ago. The kind of night where the air didn't move. A crescent moon hung low over the scorched valley, veiled in a dirty haze of dust and diesel. The village below had once been a thriving border post. Now it was nothing but collapsed mud walls, silence, and the smell of something old and rotting under the rubble. Nathan crouched behind a broken brick wall, one gloved hand resting on Ares's back. The shepherd was still, muscles coiled, ears forward. A line of sweat slid down Nathan's spine beneath the Kevlar plate. They'd moved under cover of dark 4 men, one canine, and a mission stitched together by vague intelligence. Possible weapons cache, hostile presence unconfirmed. Words that meant everything and nothing in war. Ares shifted. Nathan's hand tightened. One sniff from the shepherd, barely audible, but it said everything. Tension, something ahead, the scent of something not right. Nathan flicked 2 fingers at his team and moved forward. Ares led the way, low and silent, like smoke hugging the earth. The courtyard was open, too open. On one side, the skeletal remains of a schoolhouse. On the other, a mosque stripped to its beams. Everything in between felt like a stage waiting for actors to bleed on it. Then it happened. The blast didn't roar, it punched. A single, brutal burst of force from the left flank. The wall beside them evaporated in a spray of rock and metal. Shrapnel sliced through the night like jagged lightning. Nathan hit the ground hard, head snapping sideways against the dirt, the world going white-hot and distant all at once. His ears rang, then silence. A different kind of silence, one that felt wrong in his bones. He tried to move, couldn't. His leg was numb, pinned under debris. Smoke clouded his vision. His radio buzzed, then cut. Ares. He couldn't hear his own voice. Then movement. From the haze, a shape. Not a man. A dog. Ares. The shepherd emerged from the fog like he'd been summoned by willpower alone, his right side slick with blood. His vest was torn, a flap hanging loose, his gait uneven, but his eyes were locked on Nathan. Focused. Alive. Ares, Nathan gasped. The dog surged forward, one paw limping, teeth sinking into the shoulder strap of Nathan's vest. He pulled. Once. Twice. Nathan groaned. The pain in his leg flared white. He tried to help, but his strength failed him. So he grabbed what he could, fur, gear, instinct, and let Ares pull. Gunfire cracked nearby. Close. Muffled shouts. An enemy patrol? Or their own? No time. Ares dragged Nathan behind a fractured wall, then turned his body to shield him. That was when Nathan saw it. The wound. A jagged dark bloom of red near Ares's flank, right where the scar would later form. Blood soaked through fur and gear, but the dog didn't stop, didn't whine, didn't flinch. He just stayed between his handler and the threat, eyes burning with something unspoken. Ares growled low, scanning the open space. Another burst of gunfire ricocheted off a steel drum nearby. Nathan fumbled for his sidearm, but his hands were shaking too hard. He looked up, expecting panic in Ares's eyes. There wasn't any, only focus, only fire. Moments passed, eternal, violent, breathless, until finally, the thud of boots. American voices, reinforcements. Nathan barely registered the faces, the stretchers, the barking voices. All he saw was Ares fighting the hands that tried to pull them apart. The shepherd bared his teeth, not in aggression, but in refusal. He stayed pressed against Nathan's side like a lock refusing to be broken. It wasn't until Nathan whispered, "It's okay, boy. I'll come back for you," that Ares finally let the medics take him. Back to the present. Nathan's hand trembled slightly as he traced the old scar beneath Ares's fur. The dog lay still now, curled in the back seat of his truck, wrapped in a blanket Eli had handed over without a word. Outside, city lights blinked through the windshield. "I told you I'd come back," Nathan whispered. Ares didn't lift his head, but his tail moved once, and for Nathan Cole that was enough. Pain came in pulses. It wasn't the sharp, bright kind Nathan expected from the battlefield. No, this was dull and slow betrayal pain. the kind that stayed long after the wound closed. He lay on a stretcher, the rotor blades of the medevac whirring above, wind slapping against the open tail ramp as two medics steadied him for liftoff. His leg was wrapped tight, shrapnel removed, artery spared, but his heart beat in fragments. Because Ares was being pulled away, not by fire, not by enemies, by a clipboard. "He's my dog," Nathan said again, hoarse. "I need to go with him." The corporal at the edge of the landing zone shook his head. "He's classified as injured K9 personnel. Protocol requires evaluation by base veterinary staff before handler reassignment." Nathan's grip tightened around the stretcher rail. "I am his handler. We go together. He stays with me." The man didn't look up from his clipboard. "Not your call, Sergeant." Ares was 10 feet away, surrounded by two handlers in blue tactical gear. A portable crate waited, its door open like a cell disguised as care. The dog's head swiveled. Blood matted his side. His breathing was shallow, but his gaze locked on Nathan like a magnet refusing release. Nathan tried to sit up. The pain in his ribs screamed, but he didn't care. "Let me say goodbye, please." One of the medics laid a firm hand on his shoulder. "You need to stay down. You've lost too much blood." Nathan ignored her. "Ares!" The shepherd turned fully then, muscles weak but ears perked. His paw dragged slightly across the gravel as he strained against the handler's leash. A soft, almost confused whimper left his throat. He didn't understand. That's what killed Nathan most. He didn't understand. All those nights, in country, curled up beside each other behind makeshift barricades, all those missions clearing compounds, intercepting threats, chasing ghosts through enemy villages. Ares had never left Nathan's side, not once, and now they were prying them apart like they were just parts. "He's got PTSD," Nathan barked. "He doesn't do well with new handlers. He needs familiarity. He needs me." The man with the clipboard didn't flinch. "The final evaluation will determine suitability for reassignment or adoption. Until then, he remains under military jurisdiction." "I want a file for adoption then, right now." The man finally looked up and gave that look, the one Nathan had come to know too well over the years. Pity without substance. A blank page of sympathy. "Sergeant," he said quietly, "focus on your recovery. The dog will be taken care of." Those words, the dog, not Ares, not partner. Just a number. A notation. A piece of government gear no longer mission capable. "You don't understand," Nathan said, voice cracking. "He dragged me through gunfire to save my life. He shielded me with his body. He didn't let me die." For a moment, no one spoke. Even the wind seemed to pause. Then the engine roared, signaling liftoff. Nathan looked over one last time. Ares was already being walked away. He moved stiffly, the wound on his side oozing beneath a temporary bandage, but his head kept twisting again and again toward the stretcher. Nathan raised a hand. "I'll come for you," he called, loud over the engine. "Do you hear me, buddy? I'll come back. I promise." Ares stopped. He stood frozen for a beat, like the word had sunk past the pain and confusion and somehow reached what was left of understanding. Then, just before the handlers urged him forward, his tail moved. Once. Then he disappeared into the dark. Nathan didn't sleep for the next 4 days. Back at the forward operating base, he asked for updates. Every morning, every shift change, every time someone new came into the medical ward. Where is Ares? No one knew. Or worse, they pretended not to. Then the answer came in a folded email printout dropped on his bedside table. K9, ARES. Status, Retired. Transfer scheduled to Defense Contracted Recovery Agency for final placement. No handler reassignment approved. Retired. Like he was a pair of boots. Nathan tried to contest it. Wrote letters. Filed requests through the chain of command. One CO offered him a shrug and a hollow, "I'm sorry. The process is already underway. These dogs don't belong to us after service. They go where the contract sends them." Then where is my dog going? But that's the thing, no one said. No addresses, no handler name, no rescue group or facility to follow. Just gone. Nathan lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling fan turning slow circles above the cot. He heard phantom paws pacing outside the tent. He turned over, hand reaching automatically for fur that wasn't there anymore. And for the first time since the day he enlisted, Nathan Cole cried without shame. Not for the wound in his leg. Not for the nightmare replaying the explosion in loops, but for the silence that followed a promise that he hadn't been allowed to keep. The barracks had never been quiet before. Even at 0300 there was always something, boots scuffing tile floors, someone flipping through a deck of cards too loud, a cough from the corner bunk, soft snoring layered over the hum of distant generators. That white noise of war, the kind you learn to live in. But not this time. This time, it was quiet. And he was gone. Nathan lay on his cot, eyes wide open, staring at the metal frame of the bunk above. The base ceiling fan turned lazy circles above him, pushing nothing but still air. His leg was healing. The stitches pulled every time he shifted, but that wasn't what kept him awake. It was the space on the floor beside his bed. For years, Aries had slept there, chin resting on the tips of Nathan's boots, chest rising and falling in sync with his breathing. Sometimes Nathan would reach down in the dark and feel the warmth of his fur, just to know he was there, just to remember they were still alive. But now, the boots sat alone, and the space beside them was cold. Nathan rolled onto his side and squeezed his eyes shut. It didn't help. The dreams always found him. He saw it again over and over. The blast, the smoke, the way Aries limped through the dust, bleeding but determined. He'd wake up gasping, sweat clinging to his skin like guilt, his hand instinctively reaching toward the floor. And finding nothing. He didn't go home right after his discharge. Couldn't. The thought of his mother's porch swing or his childhood bed felt too distant, like a postcard from someone else's life. Instead, he stayed in the enlisted housing near the airfield. Surrounded by routine, surrounded by uniforms that reminded him of who he used to be. And every day, he asked the same question. Where's Aries? The answers came wrapped in vagueness. He was processed for retirement. He's in good hands. He was placed somewhere safe. But safe didn't mean loved. Safe didn't mean familiar. Safe didn't mean home. So Nathan started digging. Quietly, obsessively. Emails, phone calls, handwritten letters. He reached out to military K-9 coordinators, base veterinarians, contracting agencies, anyone with a clipboard and an ounce of authority. Most never replied. Some sent him form letters. One major wrote, "Due to classification and contracting transitions, individual handler notification is not guaranteed during non-reassignment cases. Your dog was decommissioned under Code 711. Placement considered stable." Stable. Nathan read the word 10 times, memorized its emptiness. He sat on the edge of his bed, phone in hand, rereading every old photo he had of Aries. The one of him training in Fort Bragg's obstacle course ears, pinned back, tongue lolling, pure power in motion. The one of them in a Humvee, Ares curled at his feet, Nathan flipping him a piece of beef jerky with a stupid grin, and then the last one, Ares on a stretcher, sedated, blood-soaked gauze wrapped around his midsection, a medic standing behind him, holding the leash like it was just another strap. Nathan had asked them to let him say goodbye. They'd said he needed to focus on recovery. They said he'd be placed somewhere safe, Nathan muttered aloud, his voice bitter and empty in the dark. They lied. The months passed like sand falling in a broken hourglass, slow, lopsided, and forgettable. He was honorably discharged in the spring, got an apartment near Raleigh, tried to keep busy. People asked him what he was going to do now. College, consulting, security? He said maybe, always maybe. What he didn't say was that every day began and ended the same, opening his email and searching for answers no one ever sent. Some nights, he still filled out online forms, sent one to a retired K-9 registry, another to a military surplus adoption group. Nothing came back. Nothing ever did. One night, just past midnight, he stood barefoot on the balcony of his apartment, holding a lukewarm cup of coffee and staring out over the parking lot. Rain had just passed through, leaving the pavement slick and gleaming like oil. A pair of headlights moved across the lot. Then nothing. He whispered to the empty night, "I didn't forget you." No one answered. But in the silence, he thought, just for a moment, he heard the soft click of claws on tile, that familiar rhythm, that steady walk that had once followed him everywhere. He turned. The floor was empty. Of course it was. And yet, he couldn't let go. Because Ares hadn't just been a dog. He'd been proof that something in Nathan's world still made sense. That loyalty wasn't just a word. That trust could be felt in silence, in touch, in the simple act of staying. And now that he was gone, ripped away without closure, Nathan felt hollow in a way no therapy session or medal could fix. But he made himself a vow that night, out loud, with the weight of his heart behind it. If he's still out there, I'll find him. And with that, the silence stopped being grief. It became a mission. The bench creaked softly beneath Eli as he leaned forward, forearms resting on his knees, the leash still curled loosely in his hand. The early evening light had faded into that gray-blue softness between dusk and night, when the air grows still and every sound seems to matter more. Nathan stood a few feet away, silent, giving space. He'd said everything he needed to. Words couldn't carry any further without collapsing under their own weight. Now it was Eli's turn to hold the weight, to choose whether or not to release it. Ares lay between them, breathing steadily. The way he'd shifted, just a little toward Nathan, it hadn't gone unnoticed. Eli exhaled slowly, rubbing the side of his face with a hand that trembled more than he wanted to admit. "I never had kids," he said suddenly. The words came out like gravel, scraped from somewhere deep. "Wasn't the type, always moving. Didn't know how to stick around long enough for anything real." Nathan didn't interrupt. "When I found him," Eli went on, eyes fixed on the old shepherd lying at his boots, "I thought I was doing him a favor. But truth is, I think he saved me from disappearing." His voice faltered. He didn't ask for much, just a quiet place, a bite to eat, a patch of sun when the morning hit right. He looked up now, meeting Nathan's gaze. "But I knew he belonged to someone else. The way he stared out at the street sometimes like he was waiting for a ghost." Nathan stepped forward, crouching down beside Ares. He didn't reach out, just sat there, elbows on his knees, close enough for the dog to feel him, smell him, remember. Aries opened his eyes, tired, clouded, but present. And then slowly he did something that made both men pause. He nudged his muzzle forward and rested it gently against Nathan's boot. The silence broke inside Eli first. His shoulders sank as if something heavy had slipped from them. He reached down and unclipped the leash. The sound, just a soft click of metal hit, harder than any goodbye. "I got no right to keep him," Eli said, his voice barely above the wind. "Not when he's got history I can't touch." Nathan looked up, eyes damp. "It's not about rights," he said softly. "You gave him time to survive. You gave him stillness. That matters." Eli nodded, wiping the corner of his eye roughly with the back of his hand. "I only ask one thing." Nathan braced for it. "Give him what I couldn't." Eli's voice cracked. "A peaceful life." Nathan didn't speak right away. He just reached out, slow, deliberate, and took the leash from Eli's outstretched hand like it was a torch in a relay neither of them ever asked to run. "I promise," Nathan said. No flourish, no fanfare, just two words that carried more than most vows. Eli stared down at Aries one last time, then leaned forward, brushing his fingers lightly over the shepherd's ears. "Good boy," he whispered, a tremor in his throat. "You found your way back." Aries didn't flinch. He just closed his eyes and let the touch happen, like a door that had been locked too long finally swinging open. Nathan stood, leash slack in his hand. Eli rose slowly too, both men blinking away what they didn't want to name as tears. "I'm not great at goodbyes," Eli muttered. "Neither was he," Nathan replied. "He always stayed too long." They shared a small, tired smile, one made of respect, not relief. Eli adjusted the strap of his worn bag, then turned to leave. He only made it a few steps before he stopped, looking back one last time. "You take care of each other, you hear?" "We already are." And with that, the old man disappeared into the thinning crowd, another shadow among many, but one that had helped carry the light, if only for a while. Nathan looked down at Aries. The leash hung loose between them. But the bond? It was tighter than ever. The truck door groaned open, its hinges stiff with age and rust. A layer of dust coated the dashboard like memory untouched, but waiting. Nathan stood by the passenger side, the cool metal of the door biting into his palm. He took a deep breath, bracing himself, not for the weight of the dog. Aries was lighter than he remembered, too light, bones showing where strength used to sit, but for what it meant. This was more than just a ride. This was re-entry, a crossing. "Easy, buddy," Nathan whispered, as he crouched down beside him. Aries stood shakily, his legs stiff from months of concrete and neglect. When Nathan reached toward him, the dog didn't pull away, but he didn't lean in either. He simply waited, always waiting. With gentle arms and practiced movements, Nathan lifted him like cradling history. Aries didn't resist, but Nathan felt the flinch ripple through him as he cleared the doorframe and settled into the worn leather seat. The truck groaned under the shift of weight. Aries let out a faint whimper, legs trembling as he turned in one slow circle before curling against the seat like an old soldier finding his position in the trench. Nathan closed the door quietly. No slams, no sharp sounds. The world had already been too loud for too long. He moved around to the driver's side and climbed in, his movement slow, measured. One look at Ares, curled in a loose ball, eyes half closed but ears still alert, was enough to pull a knot into Nathan's throat. He turned the key. The engine sputtered, then caught. The low rumble sent a tremor through Ares. His body tensed. He pressed himself into the seat back, tail flicking once, then vanishing beneath his belly. "Shh," Nathan said softly, resting a hand near Ares's paw but not quite touching. "It's okay." The shepherd didn't look at him, but his breathing didn't speed up either. Progress. Nathan pulled away from the curb, the truck easing into the evening traffic. Outside, the city blurred by neon signs, crosswalk lights, silhouettes of lives that didn't know the war some carried beside them in the passenger seat. He kept his eyes on the road, but his voice found its way into the silence. "You remember this old truck?" he said, smiling faintly. "You used to stick your head out the window. Drove the MPs crazy." Ares didn't react. "But you loved it? The air, the noise, the scent of everything flying in your face at once. You weren't just riding, you were flying, weren't you?" A long pause. Then slowly, Ares lifted his head just an inch. His eyes scanned the dash, the air vent, the worn glove box that had once held jerky treats and spare field gloves. Nathan saw the recognition flicker there. "It's still ours," he said quietly. "I never changed it. Couldn't." Ares rested his head again, but not the way he had before. This time, it wasn't bracing. It was remembering. The road home wasn't far, but it felt longer. Every bump made Ares twitch just slightly. Every sudden brake light reflected in his eyes like muzzle flash. Nathan slowed at yellow lights. He took wide corners. He turned off the radio. Some dogs needed music to calm. Ares needed quiet. "You don't have to do anything now," Nathan said, glancing at him. "No commands, no sitting, no clearing rooms. You're off duty." The words felt strange, like a foreign language neither of them fully understood. But when he said them, something loosened in his own chest. The soldier in him, still half wound, still half waiting for orders, breathed just a little easier. As they pulled onto a quiet road lined with tall pines, Nathan glanced at the side mirror. No one behind them. The streetlight ahead flickered once, then settled. "We're almost there," he murmured. "Not a base, not a kennel, not a shelter." He smiled softly. "We're going home, soldier." Ares didn't lift his head this time, but his tail worn, frayed, thin at the tip thumped once against the seat, and that was enough to pull tears into Nathan's eyes. The driveway was dark, the porch light was off, but the house stood waiting, a small one-story place with chipped paint and a roof Nathan kept promising he'd fix. He pulled the truck to a gentle stop, turned off the ignition, and let the silence settle. He turned to Ares. "You ready?" The dog didn't move, not from fear, just exhaustion. So Nathan moved carefully around, opened the passenger door, and whispered, "Let's go, buddy." This time, Ares shifted. He stepped down slowly, paws touching the gravel like he wasn't sure it would hold. Nathan stayed beside him, leash in hand, but slack. No orders, no pull, just presence. And they walked together toward a new chapter neither of them fully understood yet, but for the first time in a long time, they weren't walking alone. The house creaked like an old friend when Nathan unlocked the door, not loud, not sharp, just enough to remind him that time had passed and that he hadn't been here in a while, not really. Not with anyone. The lights stayed off at first. He wanted Ares to arrive in shadows, in peace. Let the silence speak before the bulbs filled it. "Come on in, buddy," Nathan murmured. Ares stepped over the threshold slowly, nose twitching with every inch. The scent of wood, dust, and home soaked into his fur. He didn't bark, didn't wag. He simply moved like a ghost, walking back into its own story. Nathan left the door cracked behind them. The house was modest, single-story, old timber flooring, corners that held more memories than furniture. The living room bled into the kitchen without walls. There was no TV blaring, no music humming, just the sound of breathing his and Ares. And the clock, tick, tick, tick. Nathan had prepared before the reunion, even if he hadn't let himself believe it would happen. In the far corner of the room, beneath the window that caught the morning sun, he'd laid out a space, a thick folded quilt, a clean bowl of water, a second bowl filled with soft, warm chicken and rice. A battered plush ball, still smelling faintly of jerky, rested nearby. And above it all, on the wall, was the photo, framed, hung low. Nathan and Ares, backlit by desert sun, gear strapped, smiles soft, the kind of picture no one posed for, the kind someone else captured because they knew this wasn't just a dog and a soldier. This was something else, something permanent. Nathan watched Ares take it all in. The dog didn't rush to the water, didn't touch the food. He stood in the center of the room, legs locked, tail still. But his eyes, they found the photo and stayed there. Nathan walked past him slowly, careful not to startle, and knelt near the quilt. "No rules here," he said gently. "You can lay wherever you want, sleep as long as you need." He paused. "You've done enough." Ares didn't move, just blinked. So Nathan sat beside the window, legs crossed, back against the wall. He didn't press, didn't plead. He just existed, soft, steady, present. Minutes passed like clouds drifting across an old battlefield. Eventually, Ares inched toward the corner. He didn't lie down on the blanket. Not yet, but he curled near it, facing Nathan. Body tense, but breathing deeper now. Nathan leaned his head against the wall and closed his eyes. "I used to think I imagined you," he said, voice a whisper. "All those nights, thinking maybe I'd made it up. That no one would believe a dog could be more loyal than a whole army." He opened his eyes and looked straight into Ares' face. "But I didn't make you up. You were real. You are real." Ares lowered his head slightly, still watching. Nathan exhaled slowly, emotion threading through his voice like fog through trees. "I missed you." That was all. Not a speech, not an apology. Just 3 words cracked open by truth. Ares didn't respond with sound, didn't crawl into his lap, didn't wag his tail, but something in his body gave way. He lowered his head to the floor, and then, inch by inch, nudged it forward until it rested just against the toe of Nathan's boot, a touch so small it would have gone unnoticed in any other life. But here, in this room after war, after loss, after years of silence, it was everything. Nathan didn't move, didn't cry. He just stared down at that gray, weathered muzzle pressed against the edge of his old combat boot, and let the stillness say what no one else ever had the courage to. You made it home. The first 3 days passed in whispers. Nathan moved softly through the house, boots swapped for socks, drawers closed gently, faucet turned low. Aries mostly stayed in his corner, sleeping in long stretches, barely eating, barely moving. But there was breath. And sometimes, between midnight and morning, there was even peace. Until the 4th night. It started with the pan. Nathan hadn't meant to drop it. He was rinsing dishes, just 2 plates, a fork, and a pan from a dinner Aries barely touched, and his fingers, slick with soap, lost their grip. The metal hit the tile with a sharp, echoing clang. In that instant, the air in the house changed. Aries was across the room before Nathan could even turn around, a blur of fur and muscle, scrambling backward, crashing into the side table. The lamp toppled, shattered in a burst of glass and ceramic, the bulb flickering once before going dark. Nathan dropped to his knees. "Aries!" But it was too late. The dog had wedged himself into the narrow space between the hallway wall and the coat rack, his chest heaving, eyes wide and locked on something that wasn't there. A place that didn't exist anymore but still lived inside him. Nathan froze. Not out of fear, out of recognition, because he knew exactly what that looked like. He saw it in mirrors after nightmares, saw it in his hands when they shook for no reason, saw it in the way he flinched at fireworks every 4th of July. This wasn't disobedience. It wasn't bad behavior. It was war echoing where it didn't belong. "Hey," Nathan said softly, inching forward, "it's just me." Aries didn't blink, didn't move. His legs were trembling. Nathan stopped halfway down the hall, lowered himself to the floor, and sat back against the opposite wall. "I dropped a pan. That's all," he said, voice steady but low. "It's not a blast. It's not gunfire. It's just a stupid, slippery pan." Silence. "I've been where you are," Nathan added. "Too many times." His voice cracked and he didn't fight it. "I remember once. I woke up under my own kitchen table. Don't even know how I got there, just boom. Something popped on the street outside, and next thing I know I'm flat on my stomach reaching for a rifle I don't own anymore." Aries blinked. Once. A small tremor ran through his back leg. "You're not broken," Nathan whispered. "You're remembering." The hallway light buzzed faintly overhead, casting long shadows across the floor. Nathan glanced up at them. "We used to be good at fighting shadows, didn't we?" he said. "Kicked down doors, cleared rooms, didn't flinch." He smiled bitterly. "Funny how it's not the big things that undo you. It's the small ones, the quiet ones, the ones that sneak in." He looked at Aries again. "I'm sorry for the noise." A pause. "I'm sorry I wasn't there to bring you home sooner." The shepherd shifted barely but enough to slide one paw forward. Nathan stayed where he was. Didn't push, didn't coax. He just let the silence hold them both. 20 minutes passed, then 30. Eventually, Aries took a breath so deep his ribs expanded. He exhaled through his nose, a shaky sound, half sigh, half surrender, and crawled forward an inch. Then another, until his head rested just a foot from Nathan's shoe. Nathan didn't move, but something inside him tight for years finally exhaled. Later that night, Nathan swept up the broken lamp. He left the hallway light off. Some shadows weren't meant to be erased. Some were meant to be understood. He left a second bowl of water out near the corner where Aries had hidden. Didn't say a word. But when he turned to go upstairs, he glanced back and saw Aries already lapping quietly, shoulders no longer shaking. PTSD doesn't knock. It doesn't ask to come in. It just lives where it wants. But now Nathan knew. Healing wasn't about forgetting. It was about sitting beside the thing that scares you and refusing to leave it alone. It started with the brush, a simple old grooming brush with a cracked wooden handle tucked inside the bottom drawer of Nathan's gear trunk right where he'd left it years ago, next to a folded field towel and a tin of shoe polish long gone dry. He turned it over in his hand for a long time before calling softly, "Hey, buddy, you got a minute?" Aries was curled on the quilt in the corner. At the sound of Nathan's voice, he didn't rise, but his ears twitched alert, acknowledging. Nathan didn't walk toward him like a soldier this time. He knelt slowly, gently, and held the brush in the open palm of his hand like an offering. No buzzers, no bath, just us. Aries didn't flinch when Nathan moved closer. That, in itself, was a victory. He eased down beside him, cross-legged on the floor, and began brushing the thick fur along Aries's shoulder with long, steady strokes. Loose hairs came off in clumps. Beneath the surface, Nathan could feel the uneven terrain of the dog's body, the rises and falls of old wounds, some healed clean, others still jagged with time. Nathan said nothing at first. Then quietly, he started talking, not to explain, not to command, but to remember. "You remember the Kandahar market?" He brushed behind Aries's ears. "That little kid with the goat who kept trying to sell us mangoes. You barked once, and the goat fainted, dropped like a sack of potatoes." Aries made no sound, but his tail moved. A flick, barely a whisper. Nathan smiled and kept brushing. "Right here," he said, sliding the bristles gently across the base of Aries's neck. "You took a hit from falling rubble when we were breaching that apartment complex. That's when they started calling you Brickhead." He chuckled, eyes softening. "I hated that nickname. You didn't seem to mind." The brush moved lower, gliding across the ribcage. Nathan paused, hand resting over a long, raised scar that curved just beneath the fur. His fingers hovered there, gentle, reverent. "This one's not funny," he said quietly. "You got that for me." The words hung heavy. Aries didn't move, but his breathing deepened, a slow inhale, as if he knew what Nathan was touching, both with his hand and his voice. "I never got to say thank you," he resumed, brushing. "You always ran toward the sound," he murmured. "Most dogs would freeze. You never did, even when we were both shaking, even when you were bleeding." His voice dropped. "I think you understood fear better than I did. You didn't ignore it. You just walked through it." Another stroke. Another knot untangled. Then, suddenly a twitch. Aries's tail. Not a reflex. A response. Nathan paused. "Hey," he said softly. "I saw that." He reached for the canteen beside him and poured a little water into a second bowl. "That's fair. You listen to my stories, I keep your water fresh. Deal?" No bark, no paw shake. But the tail twitched again, this time, twice. Nathan laughed under his breath. Not loud, not forced, just real. He shifted closer, brushing slowly along Aries's side. "This patch of missing fur," he whispered. That's from the time you tore through 3 layers of fencing to chase a drone in Fallujah. Scared the hell out of command. They thought it was a bird. You thought it was a threat. Turns out you were right. The drone was scouting for snipers. He shook his head. They said it was luck. I said it was you. The tail moved again, and this time Ares turned his head. Not all the way, but enough to look at Nathan, to see him. Nathan's throat tightened. He set the brush down. "You know what the hardest part was?" he whispered. "It wasn't the silence after you were taken. It was that I didn't get to be the one to tell your story. You gave so much, and then just disappeared into some back-office file." Ares blinked slowly. Nathan reached into his shirt pocket and pulled out something small, a laminated tag, curled at the corners from years of wear. It was Ares's original service ID. He'd kept it all this time, never told anyone. He laid it gently on the floor between them. "You're not a file," he said. "You're not a number." He looked into Ares' eyes. "You're my brother." A long silence followed. Then Ares did something Nathan hadn't seen in years. He leaned forward and rested his head not just near Nathan's foot, but on it. Solid, steady, present. Nathan didn't move, didn't speak. He just reached down and brushed his hand through the fur one last time, letting the rhythm match his own heartbeat. Scars tell stories, but sometimes the stories talk back. The sun dipped low over the treetops, casting golden stripes across the narrow path that wound through the quiet park just east of Nathan's neighborhood. The light was gentle, filtered through the tall pines and oaks, painting the world in warm hues that looked almost too soft to be real. It was the kind of evening made for beginnings, or in their case, something more fragile. A second chance. Nathan stood at the trailhead, leash in hand, the loop loose but steady. At his side, Ares sat, not quite alert, but not disengaged either. His ears twitched at every bird call, every breeze. His body, lean and battered, seemed unsure whether to settle or flee. Nathan crouched beside him. "No rush," he murmured. "We don't have to do the whole loop. Just a few steps, that's all." Ares didn't move, but he didn't flinch either. That alone felt like something worth holding on to. Nathan stood again and started forward slow, steady, like wading into a lake he hadn't swum in for years. The gravel path crunched softly under his boots. Beside him, the leash held its breath. Ares hesitated. His front paw lifted slightly, then returned to the earth. Nathan didn't look back. "Just a few steps, soldier," he said, voice soft but anchored. "That's all it ever takes to start." A second passed, then another, and then behind him, movement. The sound of cautious paws brushing gravel. Nathan kept walking. The leash drew forward gently, not pulled, not yanked, just followed. And there he was, Ares, walking, not marching, not patrolling, just walking. They moved down the shaded path together, passing an empty bench and a half-broken swing set swaying in the breeze. The park was mostly quiet, an older couple feeding pigeons on the far side, a jogger passing by with earbuds in, oblivious. But to Nathan, it may as well have been the world on pause. Every step Ares took was a soundless victory. Every twitch of his ears, a flag raised. They reached a patch of open grass near the edge of a small field, and Nathan slowed, letting the leash extend just enough for Ares to feel the freedom, the invitation. The shepherd sniffed at the edge of the trail, then stepped off slowly, 2 paws, then 4 onto the soft earth. He stopped, head low, nose moving back and forth across the grass, like memory was buried there. Nathan watched from a few feet away, hands at his sides, heartbeat loud in his ears. Then Aries moved forward, just a few steps, but he trotted, not limped, not hesitated. He trotted, and just before he lowered his head again to inspect a leaf caught in the grass, his tail wagged. Not a full swing, not some grand display, but it wagged. Twice. Nathan's breath hitched. It hit him so hard he had to sit. Right there in the grass, boots folded beneath him, elbows resting on his knees as his eyes blurred with something deeper than joy, something closer to relief. He pressed his palms together in front of his mouth like he was trying to hold back a prayer. Or maybe was one. "There you are," he whispered, barely breathing. "There you are." Aries looked up at the sound. Just a glance, then trotted a few more feet, ahead, ears perked, tail gently swaying with the rhythm of a dog remembering what it meant to be free. They didn't walk far that night, but they didn't need to. On the way back to the truck, Aries walked slightly ahead, not pulling, not racing, just leading. And for the first time in years, Nathan let himself follow. Back home, he left the porch light off. The moon was out, full and high, silvering the windows like something out of a dream. He opened the front door, let Aries step through first, and watched as the dog padded calmly across the living room floor and settled on his quilt in the corner. Not curled tight this time, not hiding, just resting. When Nathan sank onto the couch, a quiet laugh slipped from his throat. Exhausted, grateful, real. He looked at Aries and said what he'd waited years to say. "You made it back." The morning sun slanted low through the kitchen blinds, striping the hardwood floor in long, quiet bands of gold. Coffee steamed in Nathan's mug, untouched. On the floor nearby, Aries lay curled in a soft nest of old blankets, his breath slow and even for once. Nathan knelt beside him. It was supposed to be a simple gesture, just a check of his collar, maybe to swap out the old leash clip for a gentler one. But as Nathan loosened the worn leather, his fingers brushed something cool, metallic, and oddly jagged. Hidden beneath the inner layer of the collar, stitched tight as if meant to be forgotten, was a small rusted rectangle. A tag. No glint, no shine. Just age. And 2 words etched into its battered surface. Argus Tactical Services. Below that, a string of letters and numbers, barely legible through the corrosion. AT 244X9BL. Nathan froze. The tag wasn't military issued. It wasn't from any unit he knew, and it sure as hell wasn't from any K-9 retirement registry. His pulse began to drum in his ears. Argus. He knew the name. Private. Outsourced. Off the books. The kind of name that showed up in whispered conversations between contractors and pencil pushers in dusty corners of the base. The kind of name that smelled like burnt files and paychecks wired through offshore accounts. His jaw clenched. Aries stirred, sensing the change in him. His eyes opened, hazy, uncertain, but focused instantly on Nathan's expression. Not fear, not growling, just watching, always watching. Nathan ran a thumb over the jagged edge of the tag. The metal left a faint streak of rust on his skin. Something in his gut twisted, a slow, cold coil of realization. They didn't just lose you. They sold you. He stood abruptly, the chair legs scraping the floor behind him. The coffee mug tipped, shattered, spilling black liquid across the tiles. Nathan didn't even flinch. He marched to the living room, the tag clenched in his hand like a weapon. He yanked open the drawer of an old desk and pulled out a half-bent file folder labeled Discharge Docs. Buried beneath papers he hadn't looked at in years was a map of his old base, a printout of civilian contractors he'd once flagged, and a name circled in red ink. Argus Tactical Services, Tier 2 Logistics Liaison. A note he'd scribbled years ago read, "Handles post-op asset transfer." He never knew what it meant. Now he did. The silence in the house thickened. Nathan returned to Ares, who had risen to his feet, ears back, not out of threat, but readiness. "Nobody gave you up," Nathan whispered hoarsely. "They traded you." He crouched, held the tag out like an apology. "I should have known. I should have looked harder." Ares stepped forward, slowly, pressed his muzzle against Nathan's wrist, not to blame, just to be near. And Nathan's voice cracked low, almost broken. "Who else did they forget?" In that moment, something shifted. The healing wasn't enough anymore. Because healing meant nothing if the wounds were still being made, if other dogs, other Areses, were still out there, waiting in silence, behind cold fences, or worse. He didn't know what the tag would unlock yet. But he knew this. He was going to find out, even if it burned everything down. Nathan sat at the kitchen table, elbows braced, the rusted tag lying flat before him like a piece of shrapnel from a war he thought had ended. Outside, the wind stirred dry leaves across the driveway. Inside, it was too quiet, except for the hum of an old fridge and the steady, quiet breathing of Ares in the other room. He stared at the tag again. Argus Tactical Services, and the code AT244X9BL. He'd run the name through an old veterans database, found a defunct website. Just a logo, no contact form, no address, no employee listings. But a number. Buried in the domain registry, registered years ago. He picked up his phone, paused, then dialed. The line rang twice, then clicked. A flat, automated voice answered. "You've reached Argus Tactical Services. If you are a client, press 1. For all other inquiries, remain on the line." Nathan waited. A burst of static. Then a man's voice, dry and clipped, answered. "Argus, this is Handler Division. State your clearance level and ID." Nathan's voice was cold, measured. "Lieutenant Nathan Cole, former Special Operations, K9 Handler. Clearance level Bravo 7 during my last active tour. I'm calling about a dog you tagged at T244X9BL. Service name, Ares." There was a pause, long enough to signal calculation. Then the voice replied. "That asset was retired. Transferred out. No further updates available." Nathan's fingers tightened around the phone. "He's not an asset. He's my dog." Another pause, a breath. "Lieutenant, all K9 units processed through Argus post-retirement are subject to non-disclosure terms. I'm unable to provide additional details." Nathan stood slowly, pacing, his jaw clenched. He wasn't a damn crate of ammo. He wasn't a number on a spreadsheet. He took shrapnel dragging me out of a burning village. He bled beside me. Now I find him starving under a bench wearing your tag like a death sentence, and you tell me he was transferred? A sigh on the other end. "Look, sir, I understand this is emotional for you. No, you don't, Nathan snapped. Because if you did, you'd give me a name, a location, anything. He's not the only one, is he? Silence. Then, again, sir. No further information is available. Good day. The line went dead. Nathan stared at the screen. His hand trembled barely. Enough for old instincts to surge back, rage simmering beneath the years of therapy and silence. He set the phone down gently, like a weapon being holstered. Ares appeared in the doorway, head tilted, one ear flopped low, as if he knew, as if he'd heard that same voice once, issuing commands through static and steel doors. Nathan looked at him. All they said was you were retired, like some broken tool. Sent you to some goddamn warehouse life. Ares didn't bark. He just walked over, sat beside Nathan, and leaned in gently. And Nathan understood. It wasn't just about this dog anymore. It was about all of them. He went to the drawer, pulled out his old military records again. Cross-referenced the tag number with shipment codes, date stamps, post-deployment K-9 intake facilities, built a list of names scattered across old discharge logs and invoice slips, contractors, transport firms, obscure evaluation units. One stood out. Director Walter Riggs, Argus Tactical Animal Asset Operations, buried in a declassified budget appendix, just one line, and a physical address. Nathan circled it, then glanced at Ares. You ready to go find the rest of your unit, soldier? Ares blinked slowly, but something in his eyes sparked. Almost like yes. The sun hadn't fully risen when Nathan stood on the porch of his old friend's cabin. Sarah opened the door, her flannel sleeves still rolled from sleep. She looked past Nathan to the truck where Ares sat, curled quietly in the passenger seat. You sure you want to do this alone? She asked. Nathan nodded once. I need someone I trust to stay with him. Sarah studied his face, the shadows under his eyes, the tightness in his jaw, and beneath all of it, the storm, the one he never let out loud. She stepped down and walked to the truck, opened the door slowly. Ares looked at her, ears twitching. No growl, no bark, just that heavy, watchful calm of a soldier assessing a new post. Hey there, big guy, she whispered, laying a hand on his back. Looks like you've been through hell. Ares closed his eyes just for a second. Nathan came around and scratched behind Ares's ear one last time. I'll be back in 2 days, maybe 3. He eats late, sleeps light. He doesn't like loud noises or... Sarah smiled softly. Nathan, I've taken care of Marines with more issues than you. I'll manage. He gave a half laugh. It died fast. Then he looked back at Ares. I'll fix this, he whispered. I swear to you. Ares didn't move, but his eyes opened and didn't blink until the truck disappeared down the tree-lined road. The wheels hummed against asphalt as the world passed by in streaks of gray and gold. Interstate signs. Truck stops. Sunlight bleeding through bug-streaked glass. Nathan's knuckles were tight on the steering wheel. Somewhere in the background, a radio played soft static between folk songs. He didn't hear any of it. His mind was somewhere else. Somewhen else. Flashback. 5 years ago, Syria. Night, thick and choking, lit only by fire from the blast. His ears were ringing. Smoke blurred everything. Screams echoed over the radio, too scrambled to make out. He'd been thrown against a wall, helmet cracked, ribs broken. Blood ran down his left side. He couldn't see much, just shadows moving through flame, but Ares found him. Like a phantom from the dark, the dog had limped into view. Muzzle bloodied, left leg dragging. But he came. He always came. Nathan remembered grabbing the harness, remembered saying something, and then the pain, the dragging, the sprint through bullets, and that final cry, the one Ares gave when the shrapnel struck him. Not a bark, not a yelp, but a sound like grief, like betrayal. Present. Mile marker 87. Nathan shook his head. His hands flexed on the wheel. He punched the volume knob. Silence. He drove faster. By late afternoon, he pulled into a grim, over-landscaped corporate park in rural Virginia. The guard booth outside Argus Tactical Services was manned by a stone-faced young man in tactical khakis and mirrored glasses. Nathan rolled down the window. The guard stepped out, instantly alert. "Appointment?" "No, but I have business." "State your purpose." Nathan leaned forward. "Former K9 handler. I'm here about Ares. Service number AT-244X9BL. I'm not leaving without answers." The guard narrowed his eyes, then picked up the phone. A pause. A muffled voice on the other end. The guard glanced at Nathan again. "Park. In Visitor 3. Don't stray from marked zones." The gate creaked open. Nathan didn't thank him. He drove in. The Argus building was glass and concrete and silence. Cold hallways, polished floors, fluorescent light that buzzed like old wasps. Every step echoed too cleanly. At the front desk, a woman in a gray suit looked up. Her smile was the kind you practiced in mirrors. "Welcome to Argus Tactical. How may I direct you?" Nathan set the rusted tag on the counter. "I need to speak to someone who signed off on this." She glanced down at the tag, just long enough to recognize it, then looked up again, that smile dimming. "One moment, please." She vanished through a door that clicked behind her like a sealed vault. Nathan waited, fists curled, breath shallow. They're not going to brush this off. Not this time. He looked up at a wall plaque across the lobby. Glossy photo. Golden letters etched beneath it. "In service to safety. From conflict to control." Argus. Tactical canines. Save lives. Worldwide. Beneath the text, a smiling dog in mid-leap teeth bared, eyes alert. Nathan stared at it and thought of Ares, curled on the floor of that city square, skin draped over ribs, breath shallow. They save lives. He turned away before he broke something. Somewhere in his chest, the weight shifted. From grief to rage to resolve. He whispered under his breath as the office door opened and a man in a navy blazer stepped forward with a practiced handshake and a name badge that read Director Riggs. Nathan didn't take the hand. He just said, "I won't let you do this to any other dog." The building smelled like polished tile and old paper, an antiseptic kind of cleanliness that never felt clean enough. Nathan stepped through the glass double doors, letting them swing shut behind him. The lobby was silent, save for the faint hum of fluorescent lights and a distant ticking clock. To the left, a row of gray chairs no one sat in. To the right, a reception desk, modern, angular, and sterile. Behind it, a woman in a crisp charcoal blazer glanced up, eyes sharp, lips already halfway into a smile that didn't quite reach them. Nathan walked forward, slow and deliberate. His boots echoed off the marble, a rhythm of purpose and restraint. He set his military ID on the counter. The woman raised an eyebrow. "I'd like to speak to someone about one of your retired service dogs," Nathan said, voice calm but carved in stone. ID number AT244X9BL. Call name, Aries. She didn't touch the ID. Instead, she leaned back in her chair slightly, letting the words hang. Then, with a tight smile, "Another one looking for closure?" Nathan's jaw tightened. "Another one," he repeated slowly, "who isn't leaving without the truth." The woman's smirk vanished. She tapped something on her keyboard. The glow from her monitor flickered in her glasses. "You're not on the appointment schedule." "I don't care." A pause. She reached for a phone beside her, fingers resting on the receiver. "Sir, we have procedures." Nathan leaned forward, lowering his voice. "So did we. In Mosul, in Raqqa, in the alley where Ares took shrapnel meant for me. I followed protocol for years. Now you're going to follow me." The woman's hand hovered over the receiver. For a second, just one something flickered in her expression. Not fear, not guilt. Just a brief discomfort, like a mask slipping. She picked up the phone. "Director Riggs," she said, "we have a visitor." Nathan waited. Not because he wanted to, but because he had to. The lobby was still. The kind of stillness that hums just under your skin. The kind bred in places where truth goes to suffocate behind glass and jargon. There were framed awards on the wall, accolades for excellence in private security, posed photos of dogs beside dignitaries, smiles, ceremonies, PR polish. He stared at them like they were ash. None of those dogs looked like Ares. Not after what they'd done to him. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Finally, the receptionist gestured toward a sleek hallway on the far end of the lobby. "You can follow the light strip to Conference 2. Director Riggs is expecting you." Nathan said nothing. He picked up his ID and walked. The hallway was a tunnel of frosted glass and sound-dampened walls. He passed doors labeled with innocuous titles: Behavioral Ops, Canine Transfer Logistics, Reconditioning and Response. He paused in front of that last one. The door was closed. No sound came from behind it, but his gut twisted anyway. Reconditioning. That wasn't a word you used for dogs who were loved. The conference room was sterile. A rectangle of metal chairs. A long, gleaming table. A pitcher of untouched water sat sweating in the center, flanked by 2 glasses, only one filled. A man in his 50s stood near the far wall, adjusting his cufflinks. "Mr. Hale," he greeted without turning. "I'm Director Riggs. Thank you for your unannounced visit." Nathan stepped inside, but he didn't sit. "I want to know where my dog went. What you did with him after the Army discharged me. After they told me he'd be placed somewhere safe." Riggs turned, a smooth smile on his face. He had the look of a man who gave keynote speeches and survived Senate hearings with identical charm. He gestured to the chair. "Why don't we both take a breath?" Nathan stayed standing. "I've already had enough air. Let's get to the part where you tell me how a decorated military K9 ended up chained to a trash can in a city park, 30 pounds underweight and shaking at every sound." Riggs exhaled softly through his nose. "We don't condone mistreatment, Mr. Hale. But you enable it. That's a dangerous accusation. So is betraying a dog who saved lives." The two stared at each other across the table. One calm, one shaking just beneath the skin. Riggs finally pulled out a chair and sat down, folding his hands neatly in front of him. "There are protocols for all retired canines. Ares was transferred to an affiliate program, used for private security assessments, monitored, rotated out when he aged. Nathan's hands curled into fists. You mean sold? Riggs didn't blink. We provided opportunities for continued service. He wasn't property, he was my partner. Riggs leaned forward slightly. You signed the release form. You agreed to standard decommissioning protocol. Nathan's voice dropped, deadly quiet. I was told he'd be placed with a family, that he'd live out his life in peace. And you believed that? That did it. Nathan's hands slammed the table. The water pitcher jumped. So help me, he growled. If I find out even one more dog went through what he did, if I find out you buried this, I'll go public. I'll bring every handler who's lost track of their partner, and you can't stonewall all of us. Riggs said nothing for a long moment. Then, with measured grace, he reached into a folder and pulled out a piece of paper. You want a name? Nathan didn't move. Riggs slid the paper across the table. This is the last facility Ares was processed through. Independent operator. We subcontracted. That's all I can give you, and I suggest you forget the rest. Nathan picked up the paper. He didn't thank him, didn't speak. He just turned and walked out. Out in the hallway, the walls didn't feel so quiet anymore. He passed the door labeled reconditioning again. This time, he paused and placed his hand on the handle, just for a second. Then he whispered, so low it was almost a breath, I'm not done, and walked away. The office door clicked shut behind Nathan like a trigger pulled in a quiet room. Inside, sunlight filtered through half-drawn blinds, cutting the space into lines of light and shadow. A leather chair creaked as a woman in her early 60s leaned back, her hands folded neatly on a stack of manila folders. The nameplate read, Marla Jensen, Executive Vice President, Operations. She looked up with cool, polite interest, like she was greeting a consultant, not a soldier who'd just driven 3 states on fumes and fury. You must be Mr. Hale. Nathan didn't sit. I've already spoken with Riggs. I'm not here for rehearsed answers or redacted printouts. Marla smiled. It was the kind of corporate smile trained to disarm, not to comfort. And yet, here you are. He stepped forward. I want to know why Ares' decorated, loyal, still capable was discarded, starved, abandoned. I found him curled under a park bench like a ghost with a heartbeat. Her eyes narrowed slightly, and for a flicker of a second the smile cracked. I'm sorry to hear that, she said. But as I'm sure Director Riggs informed you, Argus contracts only handle transitional logistics. The dogs are assigned according to evaluations done post-military service. We don't control outcomes beyond that. Nathan's voice was low. Steel scraped against restraint. Then tell me about his evaluation. Marla turned one of the folders toward herself and flipped it open. Her fingers were manicured, movements calm, detached. Ares, serial AT244X9BL. Transferred to Argus, 12 weeks post-injury. Underwent behavioral assessment, reactivity scoring, task viability. Initial notes described him as exhibiting signs of hypervigilance, sound-triggered aggression, resistance to retraining, flagged as non-essential for further tactical employment. She looked up as if reading off a lunch order. And based on that, she continued, he was removed from the rotation pool. Nathan blinked, slow and burning. Removed, he echoed. Marla nodded. Transferred to a secondary handler system. Non-deployment, no public work, low-demand assignment. That's our code for non-essential units. The word hit harder the second time. Non-essential, like broken furniture, like extra weight on a plane. "You gave him a death sentence," Nathan said. Marla shook her head with clinical finality. "We don't euthanize unless medically necessary. These dogs are placed in civilian custody or municipal overflow care." Nathan's hands curled against his sides, his jaw clenched. "He wasn't a defective product. He was my partner, my brother." "He was your assignment," she said, tone soft but firm. "And your assignment ended." Nathan slammed his hand on the desk. The folders jumped. A ceramic pen holder tipped. "Don't you dare tell me when it ended." "I held him together with a tourniquet made from my uniform. I slept beside him in the wreckage of a Syrian compound so he wouldn't shiver to death in his sleep." Marla didn't flinch, but she sat back, her smile finally gone. "And I've signed letters to 12 other handlers who didn't come home with their dogs at all." That stopped him, briefly, but not for long. "You dumped him like trash," Nathan said, voice ragged. "You treated a decorated soldier like expired gear and didn't even look back." She closed the folder. "I followed process. And process failed him." Marla exhaled quietly. "There are 300 dogs in the system at any given time, Mr. Hale. We move them, place them, manage liability. We don't get to care the way you do. But you should." That hung there, sharp, heavy. For a moment it was silent in the room except for the hum of the overhead lights and the slow tick of a wall clock counting seconds that felt like judgment. Nathan stepped back from the desk, breath shallow. His shoulders trembled, not from weakness, but from how hard he was trying not to break. "I buried good men, but at least they got their names read at the base, their flags folded, their dogs." He choked it down, swallowed fury and grief in the same breath. "Their dogs deserve more than being passed around until they die nameless in the cold." Marla looked at him again, closer this time, not as a soldier, not even as a threat, but as a man who hadn't slept for years because somewhere in some forgotten alley or shelter a dog waited for him, or didn't. She slid a small black USB drive across the table. "There's a secondary log. Unofficial. Our handlers use it to note things we can't file formally." Nathan stared at it. "Why give me this?" Marla's voice dipped. "Because I never said I didn't care. I said I wasn't allowed to." He took the drive. "No thank you. No goodbye. Just a breath." Then he turned and walked out the door without looking back. In the hallway, the silence was thicker than before. He stopped near the end, rested his hand against the wall, and whispered into the quiet, "You're not just essential, Ares. You're the only reason I'm still here." And then he walked toward the parking lot, where the next step waited, where justice would no longer be asked for, but demanded. The hallway beyond Marla Jensen's office smelled faintly of bleach and printer ink, sanitized, manufactured calm. But Nathan Hale felt anything but calm. His boots echoed down the narrow corridor as he passed cubicles and data rooms, an ocean of silence behind glass and cold neutrality. The buzz of fluorescent lights overhead was sharp enough to slice thought, but Nathan's mind kept replaying the words. Non-essential. Transferred. Somewhere. It wasn't just what they said. It was how they said it. As if these dogs were memory sticks. Assets. Not partners. Not family. He turned a corner toward the exit when someone spoke. "Mr. Hale?" Nathan stopped, looked back. A man in a Navy technician's uniform stood near the stairwell. Early 30s, olive-toned skin, thin frame, nervous fingers drummed against a clipboard. He glanced both ways before approaching. I wasn't supposed to say anything. You didn't get this from me. From his chest pocket, the man pulled a sealed manila folder, plain, unmarked, but thick. Nathan looked at it, then at the man. "Who are you?" "Just someone who lost his partner, too," the tech said quietly. "Only mine didn't make it out of Phase 3. Nathan took the folder, their eyes locked for a heartbeat. Then the man turned and vanished back down the stairwell, like a shadow never meant to be caught in the light. Nathan ducked into a nearby break room. The lights flickered on with a hum. He locked the door. His hands hesitated for just a moment before cracking the seal. Inside, dozens of documents, lightly redacted but unmistakable, printed in black ink, dog by dog. Serial numbers, breed, deployment dates, military record summaries, AT-212 X4BL. Status, relocated. No tracking available. AT-221Q7MN. Status, deceased, complications post-evaluation. AT-244X9BL. ARES. Status, unclaimed asset, dropped from civilian contract. Nathan stared, page after page, dozens of dogs, some marked with names, others just numbers, all once trained, once trusted, then quietly forgotten. Some locations were listed as shelters, others transferred, non-disclosure holding. One had a final line handwritten in pencil. Whined for 3 days. Stopped eating on the 4th. His throat tightened. He flipped faster. A note in the margin of a particular file caught his eye. Handler request denied, citing emotional attachment. Recommend sedation during transition. And beneath it, dog growled when approached by new team. Marked as volatile. Nathan slammed the folder shut, pressing his palms flat against it like holding down a scream. This wasn't mismanagement. It was a cover-up. Each line a quiet obituary that never made the papers. Each file a burial without dirt or dignity. And Ares had lived through it, dragged his broken body through it all just to survive long enough to find a stranger who wouldn't ask for anything but love. Nathan sat back. His pulse thundered in his ears. "They lied," he whispered. "To everyone." But it wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was a trail paper in blood and silence stitched together by corporate hands, too clean to feel guilt. And it was about to end. He pulled a pen from his coat pocket and scrawled across the front of the folder. "Not anymore." Nathan stood, folder tight under one arm, and stepped out into the hallway again. This time the building didn't feel so sterile. It felt like the inside of a tomb. And he wasn't leaving it closed anymore. The rain had started quietly along the interstate, then grew relentless. By the time Nathan pulled into his driveway, the world outside was blurred by gray. He sat for a moment, engine running, staring at the manila folder on the seat beside him. Inside, the truth he'd found and dreaded. In the house, Ares's claws clicked softly on the hardwood. He didn't bark. He never did. When Nathan passed, soaked and silent, the dog lifted his head from the blanket, one ear tilted. "I got answers, buddy," Nathan whispered. "Not the kind we wanted, but truth." At the kitchen table, Nathan opened the folder. The first file was Ares, cold, clinical, K9 Division. Syria, explosive detection. Handler, Sergeant Nathan Hale. Status, retired, unclaimed. Nathan's voice cracked. "You were never unclaimed." Page after page followed. Tango, behavioral issues, euthanized. Bella, 2 tours, saved lives. Sheltered, last check-in 4 years ago. Rufus, spinal injury, no follow-up listed. Dog after dog. Brave service reduced to margin notes. Owner passed. No next of kin. File closed. Nathan stared at the table full of faces. Trained to trust. Taught to serve. Left behind. He slid to the floor, sat beside Ares, resting a hand on his side. They threw you away, like you didn't carry me out of hell. Resolve hardened in his chest. He cleared the table, arranged the files, and scrawled in bold across the folder. The forgotten. Then below, we remember. Nathan couldn't sleep that night. Instead, he recorded a short video. In the soft glow of the kitchen, he whispered to Ares, called him Soldier. Watched him push himself up and limp across the floor, scarred body leaning against Nathan's chest. The video ended in silence, but spoke volumes. Then he wrote, "His name is Ares. He's not just a dog. He was my partner. He saved my life. They called him non-essential. They promised he'd be safe. They lied. This isn't just about Ares. It's about every hero dog discarded like gear. We remember the names of generals. It's time we remember the paw prints, too." He posted it with one line, "Honor the paws." By morning, 47 views. By nightfall, nearly 1 million. Comments poured in, soldiers, medics, families, strangers. "I'm sorry, Ares. He deserves a medal." And over, "Honor the paws." Someone made a poster. Ares, scars visible, standing against a battlefield sky. Caption, "Heroes don't always speak, but they remember everything." News outlets picked it up. Retired handlers admitted they hadn't known. A groundswell began, one Nathan hadn't expected, but one Ares deserved. Messages flooded in. Handlers, veterans, families, dogs like Gator, like Tango, lost in paper trails or lies. "They gave me a medal, not my dog." Nathan printed every message, covered the guest room walls with faces and names. Then came offers. Animal rights groups, senators, journalists, people who'd tried for years to raise awareness. Now, they had momentum. "You didn't just bring me back," Nathan whispered to Ares one night. "You brought them all." Ares, resting easier now, lifted his head. No theatrics. Just presence. Just the quiet bond of 2 survivors who refused to let the forgotten stay forgotten. The house was quiet. Too quiet for most. But for Nathan, silence was a fragile gift. Outside, the moon hung low behind drifting clouds. Ares lay near the fireplace, breathing slow and shallow. Nathan sat on the rug, a blanket draped over his shoulders, a folder of photos in his lap. The room smelled of cedarwood and wet fur. Nathan watched Ares's ears twitch in dreams, one paw spasming like chasing or fleeing. He brushed his hand against Ares's side and whispered, "Remember the village?" His gaze dropped to the scar near Ares's ribs, jagged like cracked earth. Then the room dissolved. Flashback. Syria, 3 years ago. Night in the desert hummed with tension. Nathan's team moved through a village of crumbling clay and pocked concrete. Ares led, nose down, body low. The explosion didn't sound like thunder. It sounded like teeth snapping shut. Dust, blood, heat. Nathan hit the ground, thigh burning, unable to move. Out of the chaos, Ares returned. red-stained muzzle, eyes locked forward. He bit Nathan's flak jacket, dragging him as bullets snapped past. Ares yelped as he was hit, but didn't stop. Nathan, through clenched teeth, "Keep going," and Ares did. Present, back in the living room. Nathan's hand rested on the scar. Ares shifted in his sleep, one paw on Nathan's wrist. Nathan whispered, "You saved me. But I couldn't save you. Not then." Ares opened his eyes just enough. Nathan placed a photo of them before that mission near Ares's water bowl. "That village took from us. Maybe tonight we take something back." Ares's tail twitched. Nathan closed his eyes, no longer flinching from the silence. Later, in a quiet room, a journalist sat across from Nathan and Ares. No makeup, no sound bites, just truth. Nathan began, "His name is Ares, but that was earned. We met in Syria. He didn't wait for orders. He listened between them." Ares shifted at Nathan's familiar tone. Nathan looked at the camera. "He saved me, dragged me out, took shrapnel, nearly died next to me. When I was evacuated, they said he was retired. They lied." He recalled finding Ares again, skin on ribs, eyes dull, lying beside a homeless man. And he looked at me like no time had passed. "What did you say?" the reporter asked. "I didn't need to. He came to me." That's how it always was. Nathan pulled out the folder names, photos, statuses, unknown, relocated. Not just one dog, dozens, maybe hundreds, war dogs, police dogs, forgotten. "If you could say something to those in charge?" the reporter asked. "We train them to never leave a soldier behind. Maybe it's time we do the same." The next day, the story dropped. We left them behind. A still of Ares, one ear flopped, watching Nathan with trust. Argus denied the claims, cold and dismissive. The internet erupted, some with support, some mocking. Nathan closed his laptop, hands shaking from rage, not fear. And then Ares appeared. No bark, no whine, just leaned against Nathan's knee. "Still here?" Nathan buried his hand in Ares's neck. "They're louder now. But you never cared about noise, just direction." He reopened the laptop, this time reading messages of shared pain and thanks. He hit record. "This isn't about proving anyone wrong. It's about finding those left behind. Ares made it back. Some didn't, but some still can. And if you wonder what difference we make, look closer. This dog isn't broken. He's a survivor. And we're not quitting." He looked at Ares. "We keep going, don't we, soldier?" Ares chuffed softly. Nathan smiled. The screen faded to black, but the fire stayed lit. The warehouse smelled of bleach and old metal. Nathan tightened the scarf over his nose as he stepped through the rusted side door, flashlight beam cutting through shadows of abandoned crates. Beside him, Luis, ex-Army medic turned animal rights investigator, paused at a dented transport cage. "You sure this is it?" Luis asked. Nathan crouched, brushing aside shredded paper and bits of fur clinging to the corners like ghosts. "Matches the manifest we pulled. These crates were marked for relocation." Luis frowned. "To where?" Nathan pointed at the stamped metal. "For evaluation. Non-essential assets." Further inside, the air felt colder. Rows of kennels, all empty. Some blood-stained. A broken chain swung from a wall like a collar snapped mid-panic. Nathan's beam froze on a torn folder beneath debris. Inside, Photos, documents. Dogs marked deactivated, but not euthanized, redirected to Delta 6 facility, biological assessment, Tier 3, external lab 14B. Luis's voice cracked. They weren't put down, they were sold. Used, Nathan muttered. Experimented on. Then a soft whimper. Nathan and Luis ran toward it. Behind supply boxes, beneath a torn insulation blanket, a German shepherd. Barely skin and bone, one eye swollen shut, the other filled not with fear, but defeat. Nathan knelt. "Hey, buddy, you're okay now." He wrapped his jacket around the dog's frail frame. Luis read the tag. Argus, batch 7.9. Same series as Ares. Nathan lifted him. "Come on, soldier. You don't get left behind again." The drive back was silent. Luis cradled the dog later named Ghost as Nathan sped through the night, thoughts racing. How many more? How long has this gone on? At the clinic, Ghost was barely breathing, but he was breathing. By dawn, alive. Nathan stayed at his side, watching his chest rise and fall, recalling Ares, the scars, the loyalty, the betrayal. He pulled out his phone and hit record. "This is Ghost. He served. He protected. He was left behind. But he's not invisible anymore. You wanted proof? This is it. I swear to every name in that folder you will be seen. You will be saved. Posted with hashtag #HonorThePause. By nightfall, 1.2 million views. But Nathan didn't care about numbers. He cared that one more soul hadn't died alone. And somewhere, Ares lifted his head and howled as if saying, "You found him." Outside City Hall, chants echoed. "They served. They stayed. Don't throw them away." Nathan stood at the steps, Ares at his heel. Reporters asked, "How does it feel to have 500,000 signatures?" "It feels like they were always listening, just waiting for someone to say it out loud." Inside, tension filled the chamber. Council members watched as Nathan spoke, no notes, just truth. "We train them to fight, but not to rest. We teach loyalty, but don't return it. We give orders, and when they obey too well, we abandon them." He gestured to Ares. "He carried me when I couldn't walk. Shielded me from shrapnel. They said he'd be safe. That was a lie." He paused. "Over 300 K9s, untraceable status. One called Ghost Found, dying in a warehouse labeled non-essential. And 500,000 Americans who believe we can do better. And counting." Ares shifted, as if listening to history finally being written. "This isn't about revenge. It's about what we owe. Honor, peace, a future." The council chair, Rosa Delgado, daughter of a Marine, spoke. "We're drafting the K-9 Dignity Act, mandatory retirement rights, public adoption records, no private disposal. They won't be forgotten." Applause erupted, not from officials, but from the press gallery and the crowds outside. Later, Nathan stepped into the night. A child approached, hanging a cardboard medal on Ares's neck. "For bravery." Ares leaned forward, gently licking the boy's hand. That night, the city quieted. Nathan and Ares walked a riverside trail, just two shadows side by side. No leash needed, no commands, just memory. Nathan whispered, "Tomorrow they vote. Maybe it won't pass. But we already won, didn't we?" Ares tilted his head. "They saw you, and they listened, because you walked." Nathan touched Ares's battered tag. "You carried me out of hell. This time, I carried you back." A breeze moved the trees. Then a bark, solid, strong. Aries stood, ears forward, answering a call only he could hear. Nathan laughed. "Say it louder. One more time." Aries barked again. Nathan nodded. "Tomorrow we walk in together. Just two survivors." And as they turned toward home, Aries trotted ahead tail high, head up beneath the silver moon. It wasn't the kind of morning that demanded a ceremony. No banners, no fanfare. Just a quiet sky, brushed in soft blue, and the gentle rustle of leaves across the manicured lawn of Riverside Park. People gathered anyway. Some wore medals, some carried leashes. Some just brought silence and a deep ache tucked beneath polished shoes and worn-out uniforms. They came from far towns, from different years. Veterans, handlers, families who had once stood beside fur and duty and then had to learn to stand without it. Nathan stood near the back. He didn't want a spotlight. Aries was beside him, head up, chest forward, no vest, no leash, just freedom. The podium was modest, ringed by low hedges and 2 rows of folding chairs. Reporters lined the perimeter but kept their distance. No one dared speak too loudly. It was the kind of reverence that didn't need to be taught. Then the mayor stepped up, cleared her throat, and spoke. "Today," she said, voice carrying just enough, "we dedicate more than a statue. We correct a silence. We remember the forgotten." A breeze stirred the tarp. "This monument is not just for one dog, though one did start it." She looked at Aries, smiled. "It's for all of them." The cloth fell away. And for a moment, just one perfect second, no one breathed. The statue was life-sized, cast in aged bronze. A German shepherd in mid-stride, one paw lifted, muscles taut as if caught in the act of running not toward danger but toward someone he loved. His ears weren't both up. One flopped gently, just like Aries. His tail didn't wag. It led. And beneath him, etched into a slab of polished stone, 5 simple words. They never asked for medals, only love. There was no applause, only a hush, a ripple of throat clearing, a whisper of sniffles, the kind of silence that honored more than volume ever could. Nathan stepped forward, not because he was called, but because it felt right. Aries walked with him. They stood at the base looking up. The sculptor had caught something in the eyes, something no photo ever could. Not obedience, not fear, but trust, undeniable, undeserved, eternal. Nathan's voice came low, almost beneath breath. "That's you," he whispered. Aries tilted his head, as if recognizing a memory that wasn't just his, but theirs. "They'll remember now," Nathan added, softer still. "Not just the heroics, but the healing, the waiting, the scars no one saw." People began stepping forward one by one. An older woman placed a single daisy at the statue's base. A boy in a wheelchair saluted it. A soldier with missing fingers knelt beside it and whispered something only the wind heard. And in that quiet, Nathan saw what this was really about. Not justice, not revenge, not even history, but peace. A way to say, "We see you now." A way to say, "We're sorry it took this long." A way to say, "Thank you." The mayor returned briefly, handing Nathan a folded sheet. He opened it. It was a copy of the finalized legislation. Canine Valor and Retirement Reform Act. Mandatory protection. Proper retirement. National Registry. Investigations underway. Signed, stamped, law. Nathan looked down at Ares, who sat calmly watching the people, not the statue, still listening, still waiting. "You did this," Nathan whispered. "You didn't bark. You didn't bite. You just stayed." He kneeled then, not for the cameras, not for the crowd, just for the one who never left his side. He rested his forehead briefly to Ares's and breathed, "You're free now." And for a fleeting moment, beneath the shadow of a bronze dog and a line of forgotten names, it felt like the world had remembered how to be kind again. The breeze carried laughter now, not just voices, but release, the kind that comes after years of holding something in too long. Children zigzagged across the green in Riverside Park, chasing each other between rows of folding chairs and cooling lemonade stands. But every so often, they'd stop quiet, reverent, and stretch out tentative fingers toward the shepherd lying beneath a shaded oak. Ares didn't flinch any more. He didn't cower when they squealed. He didn't pull away when their hands brushed the scar behind his ear. He just lay still, eyes soft, tail flicking like a metronome of calm. One little girl, no older than 7, leaned in and kissed the top of his muzzle. "He smells like peanut butter," she giggled. Nathan, standing nearby, smiled through the ache in his throat. Ares had once been a weapon. Now he was a lesson. A living bridge between what had been asked and what had been lost. Across the field, a canvas banner flapped gently in the wind. "The Ares Project," white letters against deep blue. Below it, volunteers handed out pamphlets and answered questions. A woman with a prosthetic arm led a blind Labrador to a group of teens, explaining how the dog had once dragged her from a minefield. Nearby, a man in a Vietnam vet cap hugged a retired handler he hadn't seen in 30 years. It wasn't just a gathering. It was a stitching, a slow, intentional mending of people who had all been torn in similar places and were now learning that healing didn't always mean forgetting. Nathan found himself in conversation after conversation, each one different, but all echoing something familiar. "Mine served in Afghanistan. Never came back. We had a bomb dog. They wouldn't even tell us where she went after decommission. I thought I was the only one who still dreamed of him barking in the dark." Some were quiet. Some broke down halfway through. All ended with the same phrase, "Thank you for telling your story, for telling his." Near the refreshments, a small podium had been set up for afternoon remarks. But no one expected a speech from Nathan, not anymore. That's why, when he stepped up with Ares padding beside him, it quieted the whole park. No microphone, no papers. Just one man with his dog. "I used to think I lost him," Nathan said, nodding toward Ares, who sat and stared out at the crowd. "But what I really lost was the idea that someone would care." He paused, looked down, then continued. "They told me he'd be placed somewhere safe. They lied. And I carried that lie for years. Thought it was mine to bear alone." He turned slightly, eyes sweeping the dozens, now hundreds, who had gathered. "But it wasn't just my lie. And today, this—" He gestured toward the banner, toward the volunteers, toward the wagging tails and wrinkled faces. "This is us, taking it back." A light breeze stirred again. Ares nudged Nathan's hand. He rested it gently on the shepherd's head. "The Ares Project isn't about me. It's not even just about him. It's about all of them, the ones who worked in silence, fought in silence, and were discarded in silence." A hush fell deeper. "Starting today, We fight for them louder than ever." There was no ovation, just people standing straighter, shoulders lifted, eyes glassy, because sometimes applause isn't clapping, it's remembering. Later, Nathan sat at the edge of the event, sipping lukewarm coffee from a paper cup. Aries lay at his feet, belly full from too many treats, tail flicking in half-sleep. Beside him, a volunteer updated him on day 1 stats. 12 applications for adoption, 5 dogs rescued from holding kennels already, 1 flight team offering to transport retired canines from across the country. Nathan let out a low whistle. All this in a day? The volunteer smiled. 1 dog changed the story. People just needed permission to listen. Nathan looked down. Aries was still awake, still watching, always listening. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the memorial lawn, a little boy approached. He had something clutched in his hand. Nathan recognized it, an old challenge coin, likely from a veteran in the crowd. The boy knelt and placed it carefully at the base of the statue, then looked up. "For all the ones who didn't get to come home," he whispered. Nathan's chest tightened. The child stood, patted Aries gently, and walked away. A breeze stirred the grass, and in that fading light, the line between grief and purpose softened, became something else entirely. Something whole. The community hadn't just remembered, it had rebuilt. And this time the heroes at the center of it had names and homes and second chances. The wind was different up here, cleaner, quieter. Nathan eased down onto the grass with a soft grunt, knees creaking beneath him. Behind him, the old truck clicked as its engine cooled. The hill wasn't steep, but it was just far enough from town that everything below looked small. Tucked under a velvet sky, Riverside shimmered like a constellation that hadn't quite been named yet. And beside him, still as stone, loyal as breath lay Aries. They didn't speak for a while. The kind of silence that didn't need to be filled. Nathan leaned back on his palms, gaze sweeping the landscape. He could make out the curve of Main Street, the water tower casting a long shadow eastward, the faint glow from the new Aries Project shelter nestled behind the park. Life moved on, but some things stayed. "You saved me twice," Nathan said finally, his voice rough from wind and memory. Aries turned, ears twitching. One stood tall, the other bent, always listening. Nathan reached out. Aries met his hand halfway with a slow lick across the palm, an answer that said, "I know." The first time had been a firefight. Afghanistan. A rooftop. 2 heartbeats between the scream and the shrapnel. Aries had launched himself toward the blast, knocking Nathan back just far enough to live. The second time was quieter. It came years later, after the war, after the medals and the limping discharge, after the kind of darkness that no VA paperwork ever truly documented. Nathan had been living in the shell of a man who once served, waking up to ghosts and sleeping beside regrets. And then one day, there he was. Aries. Older, scarred, forgotten, but not lost. Nathan tilted his head back now, watching the sky change. Daylight dissolved slow like warm water washing paint from a canvas. Hints of purple stretched across the horizon, streaked with ember orange and sleepy gold. Above them, the first stars blinked into view, tentative and shy. "You remember this hill?" Nathan asked, glancing sideways. "Used to bring you up here for training. Used to throw that ratty tennis ball all the way down that slope." Aries didn't move, but his tail gave one small thump. Nathan chuckled. "You'd beat gravity to the bottom." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out that very same ball-sun-bleached, half-chewed, soft from age. He didn't throw it, just rolled it between his palms, like a prayer. "They think we're heroes now," he said. "But we were just trying to survive, huh?" The wind stirred again. And somehow, we did. Ares shifted closer, resting his chin on Nathan's boot, the same spot he'd claimed the first night they came home together. Some things were instinct, others were promises. Nathan watched the lights below flicker into full bloom. Porch lights, street lamps, headlights winding down slow country roads. But up here there was no movement, only belonging. He sighed. "I thought revenge would make it better. That if I exposed them, Argus, the suits, the ones who used you like gear, it would fix something." He paused, ran a hand along Ares's back. But it wasn't about fixing. It was about witnessing, telling the truth, holding the line. Another star appeared. Then 3. "You taught me that." Ares didn't answer in any way a human would recognize. But the silence between them thickened, not with emptiness, but with meaning. They sat like that for a long while, until the stars above were too many to count, until the last threads of sunlight had slipped below the earth, and only memory remained warm. Nathan finally stood, brushing grass from his jeans. He looked down at Ares, who hadn't moved. "Come on, soldier," he said softly, tapping his thigh. "Time to go home." Ares lifted his head, not fast, but with purpose. And when he rose, he walked without a limp. As they reached the truck, Nathan opened the passenger door and waited. Ares paused at the step, looked out one more time across the sleeping town below. And then, with a steady leap, he climbed in. Nathan followed, shutting the door gently behind him. The truck rumbled to life, and as they drove down the hill, 2 silhouettes outlined by starlight, one truth, settled into the night like a benediction whispered from the universe itself. Some bonds don't fade. They guide, they anchor, and they outlast war, silence, and time. In the end, this wasn't just a story about a dog. It was about loyalty that outlives memory, about wounds, seen and unseen, and about the healing that begins when someone chooses to stay. Ares was more than a German shepherd. He was a partner, a soldier, a survivor, and above all, a reminder that even when the world forgets, some bonds refuse to break. They endure in the quiet moments, in shared scars, in the gentle thump of a tail against an old boot. Through Nathan's fight, we saw how one man and one dog could spark a movement, how truth, when spoken with love and courage, can bring justice, and how even the most broken hearts can rebuild if they have someone to walk beside them. Let this story remind us, animals aren't tools, they're companions. They serve without question, love without condition, and protect without pause. So tonight, if you have a dog curled at your feet, or a memory of one in your heart, hold it close. Say thank you, because heroes don't always walk on 2 legs. Sometimes they wait by your side, asking for nothing but a place to belong.